All right, welcome to our special Halloween version of our ROG bi-monthly meetup. Used to be monthly, but then Florian and I got overwhelmed, so it's bi-monthly. And today's topic it's about the scary aspects of robots. Scary here intended to be more talking about the corner cases we see as you start to get to 500,000, more than that, robots, the corner cases, unexpected things that caught you by surprise that your customers probably didn't actually want to see happen on that robot. We'll jump into that a little bit later once we go around the room and do some introductions. So I'll kick off, introduce myself. I'll call the next person, and then person calls on the person after them, and so on and so forth until we call on everybody. So. Right now, I should be able to keep track of who we've called on and who we haven't, but putting in the emphasis on the person doing introductions. So I'm Joe Wiechek. I co-founded ROG with Florian, I want to say 5 years ago now. I previously was at Brain Corp leading their technical operations team. That team scaled the fleet of autonomous floor scrubbers from 50 when I joined to many thousands when I left. We also launched another vertical in vacuum cleaning, so commercial vacuum cleaner robot. And then all in the fleet size when I left was over 16,000 robots deployed. And I happen to know that number is higher, but I don't know what their most recently published number is, so I'm not going to say anything about that. About 2 years ago, I left Brain to come over here to Outrider, which is a autonomous distribution yard company. So automating the process of pulling trailers from dock doors to parking spots back to dock doors. And essentially, it's a robot on a robot, so we can connect and disconnect the trailers autonomously. We can also pull the trailers autonomously. And so it's been a similar lessons learned, application of what I learned at Brain, but also given that it's a much more industrial space, much larger robots. Some might call it an autonomous vehicle. Definitely some other lessons we've learned here. Bernardo, I haven't seen you in a while, so call on you.
Thanks, man. Yeah, good to see you, Joe. Can you guys hear me well?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, I'm Bernardo Ospina. I work for Romeric Corporation. I'm in sales, and I've been with Romeric for about 3 years, and I'm also in charge of partnerships. Attending these meetings regularly from for the past 2.5 years or something like that. And we do software. So I've come prepared with one scary story for later on the software side. And I've been in automation my entire career. From a software standpoint, always helping manufacturers be smarter and increase throughput and be more efficient. I work with large and small companies. Some you will know, some you have never heard of them, between Canada and the US. And I've usually had to cover large territories, and it's been quite an interesting journey. That's probably it. I'm gonna call on Andrew.
Hi. Yeah, sorry, I just realized my name there says just my initials, but my name is Andrew Bennett. The F is my middle name, my middle initial. I've been coming to these meetings for a few years now as well. In fact, I might have started back when I lived down in San Diego. I'm not sure. But then I lived in San Francisco for a few years and just recently left California to come live in the UK with my girlfriend while I work on my job search. So I'm still looking at jobs in California, and if that works out, I might be back, but I also might find a job here in the UK, and then we'll see what happens. Most of my robotics work was actually back in university, and then a job I had a few years later called Harbeck. They do manufacturing. They're a contract manufacturer. They do a lot of injection molded plastic parts, and they had a lot of robots involved in mostly paired with injection molding machines, either putting things into the molds or taking things out of the molds and putting them on conveyor belts. There's some other stuff, but none of them were mobile robots. So I'm especially interested in mobile robots like what Joe was talking about, floor scrubbers or vacuums or other types of mobile robots, the ones that Florian has there in his robot space that move shelves around and things like that. So I just want to learn more about it, and maybe my next job will involve robots. Time will tell. Oh, so then I will call on Phil to go next.
Yeah, hi everyone. Phil Rohn. First time here, really excited. Give you some background about myself. I was most recently at Bosch in the consumer goods space, leading a team of software developers, robotics engineers, trying to develop a next generation residential floor cleaning robot. Learned a lot. We were doing well, and then we were not, as happens. So for the last 2 months, I'm trying to take my experience and bootstrap a consulting firm on more software developer, robot DevOps assistance. I don't have a ton of horror stories right now, but I'm sure I can come up with a few of situations where the young software engineers just made mistakes, and trying to prevent that and make development faster. Before that role at Bosch, when I started out of grad school, I was working with the PR2. So I've been in the ROS world for over 10 years. That was really cool. I was the hardware engineer with a bunch of software engineers, learned a lot, different ways, the way software and hardware approach the problem, and why there's some conflict sometimes. And before that, I did a PhD at the University of Washington in surgical robots and medical instrumentation, which was really cool. And yeah, so I like robots. I like building things, and would love to help other people build their robots and not make the horrible mistakes. So thanks for having me here. And I'm going to call on Florian.
I'm Florian, partner in crime with Joe here. Can't believe it's been 5 years, Joe. That's pretty amazing. I'll follow up with a PSA after my intro. So also co-founder of a company called In Orbit. I think all of you know what we do. We do robot software. And one of the maybe this is more for Phil's benefit, but the origin story of ROG was Joe and I talking and lamenting the lack of a place where this kind of geekdom can get together and talk about what it takes to run robots in the real world versus the more traditional, how do I make a robot? Or how do I run any other thing except for a robot, right? Like satellites in the case of Joe, or data centers. And we kind of realized that robots are their own thing, right? That they're not a sensor stuck on the wall. They're not a data center with a bunch of hosts. But if we want robotics to scale, to have a robot in every office, in every corner, then we need to figure this out. So we said, hey, let's start talking about it. We created, in a collaborative effort, the Robot Operations Manifesto. Haven't touched it in a while. I think it has held up pretty well, but maybe it's due for a revision. And then this group, we have the meetup that you are all part of. Thanks, Phil, for joining. We're up to 274 members. So my PSA is go tell your friends that this exists. And maybe by the end of the year, we'll get to 300. I mean, those 00 numbers are completely meaningless, but we tend to attach to them. So, maybe that's a good goal for the year.
I like that goal. It's a good goal.
Yeah.
So Bernardo and Andrew and Phil, since you've worked with other companies, I have a number of different categories based on call it the lessons learned that I have. I need to be a little bit somewhat cagey about some specific examples for obvious reasons, but I do have some categories of failures. I'm hoping we'll stoke some conversation, either your last company or previous companies. But Bernardo, since you already offered that you have a story you brought forward, if you're comfortable going first, I'd like to just jump right in and have you talk about it. Ideally, we have some lessons learned or some advice to avoid these mistakes in the future. But it doesn't mean we can't also just open the room to discussion about how others would prevent those mistakes. So tell us what happened, what you learned from it, and then I think how we'll plan this if there's no pushback is you open each story up for either questions about scenarios or other folks take on those situations.
Absolutely. Do I get to call who's next?
I'm going to try to do folks volunteering, but you can call as long as you don't call on me.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Okay, you're pretty good on that. Yeah, you're the one I have in mind. So yeah, we actually so I was not there when this happened, but it's one of the stories that I've heard here at Romeric. Actually, we were behind the Alpha Bot, which is an AGV type of device that was put together by a Boston-based company called Alert Innovation. They created this Alpha Bot system, which is not just the AGV itself, but a racking system for micro-fulfillment that was created for Walmart, and actually it was financed by Walmart themselves. They actually paid them to put together something that will help them compete against the Amazons of the world, as they were, welcome Daniel, as they were actually having a very manual operation when people were sending their grocery fulfillment orders on Walmart.com. I don't know if you've been at a Walmart store and seen a guy actually pushing a car and doing grocery shopping for you and sending you a text message and everything is ready. So it was very manual. They needed to do something more automated and put some robotics into it. So the people from Alert put together the hardware and called on us for help with that software. So having to work in two separate teams, hardware and software simultaneously, was quite an experience. And the horror story that I'm referring to is the day before it was a big presentation for Walmart. Basically, the type of meeting that defines if the project continues moving forward or not, and if they're gonna cut the wire and put a stop on it or keep moving forward. The day before that, when we had everything ready and lined up on the software side, they made significant changes to the hardware, and that was a horrific day. A day before the presentation, so we had to move real quick to actually be able to characterize the new hardware and create a digital twin version of it that will actually work in a simulation scenario that we had put together for them for the presentation. That was actually the central part of the presentation. We were going to show Walmart this how it worked. So the good news is we managed to put it together. It was a great. Long story short, they loved it, and fast forward a few years later, Walmart ended up acquiring Alert Innovation. Now Alert is part of Walmart, and the AlphaBot system with Romeric software doing the management of not only fleets of hundreds of bots, but also the low-level controller that actually tells the robots what to do. It's already being deployed in over 18 stores in the US, and they're deploying more stores as we speak. So yeah, that's the horror story I wanted to share. Hope I was terrific enough.
So yeah, Bernardo, lesson learned from that. If you had to do it all over again, how would you prevent the pain, or what happened that they unleashed this hardware change on you at the last minute, and how would you go about that next time?
It's basic communication between the hardware and software teams. That's it.
Yep. Phil, I saw you laugh a little bit when he mentioned there was a big hardware change. Any corollary to anything in your career on that one?
Oh yeah, I mean it's the same. The engineers get really excited to show the latest thing at the demo, and they're like, "We're gonna get this in," and it's please don't. I think that was our lesson learned. We had to give a lot of demos to keep our management funding us early on, and getting the team willing to not put the very latest thing in the demo, like stick with stability. Stability matters, not the latest, greatest thing you hacked up last night. And once we got everyone to commit to something like that, it was much easier. But yeah, we had plenty of those where somebody makes a change and now it's not, why isn't it working? Well, I just did this one little thing. I wanted to get that little feature in. And it's like, you can't do that when you're 2 days away or 1 day away.
So
yeah.
I'll admit to being on the wrong side, on the YOLO side of that debate myself more than once. But I, why can't we have both? Why can't we have the latest and stability?
Florian, I've seen too much stuff to really get on board with that. But I got some advice years ago now by someone who was mentoring me at the time, and his advice to me was, whenever asking this kind of question, ask yourself what's best for the company. Sometimes you have, like Phil, if they're not going to cut a new check, you have to impress them, sometimes at risk. But
Sure.
Sometimes if there's high risk and it's going to be DOA, how do you fail fast? Maybe the night before, if it runs right off the bat, you just get it out and you don't touch it, and then you get someone there 2 hours early the next morning to try and make sure that any launch failures are handled, and you roll with it. Or maybe you cut your losses the night before and say, right, this is not worth the risk at this stage of the game. But I think it's also very situational, which is a very non-answer. But if there's funding on the line, of course, you're going to do certain things. Or if customer retention on the line, you're going to do certain things. That if it's just, hey, look at what we're doing, is a very different context.
So I want to pass it on to Daniel. We did intros, so we'll give you a chance, Daniel, to make an intro. But just to maybe wrap up on that. So when, as you were saying, sometimes the right thing to do is to go out on a limb and do something maybe a little crazy. The nice thing that I would say is, with what we do with robot operations, if the robot does something silly or bad, it only justifies why you need more robot operations. So in a way, it's like, yeah, see, we need more robustness, because robots will always end up doing something, not quite what you would like them to do. So you do have to have recovery mechanisms. You have to have monitoring, all of those things that I know, Phil, you are trying to spread the gospel of that. So I think that's great. Daniel, we usually go through a round of intros. This is recorded, so one day maybe it will get posted and you'll be able to go back and hear about everyone else, but would love to hear from you.
Hi, nice to meet you all, guys. So my name's Daniel Brown. So I'm working as a business development manager for Fuji Innovation Lab. So the Innovation Lab is part of Fuji's innovation department. So we're looking to help expand, diversify Fuji's business into new areas. So our parent company is an industrial robotics manufacturer out of Japan. So our main products are machine tools and industrial robots for electronics assembly. So pick and place machines are our main products. So in the innovation department, we do various startup scouting, looking for collaborations, investment opportunities, that kind of thing, and also support for the new projects that Fuji has going on. So one of which is actually an AMR project for retail environments. So that's how we had contact with InOrbit and Florian's team. and so they're helping us along as we look to commercialize that product.
All right. Well, welcome. I will also double down and say, not only can you watch this video again and learn who we are, hopefully everybody comes back the next time we have a meeting, and then we'll do a round of introductions again.
Okay, thanks very much.
Yeah.
I wanted to go back to Bernardo's comment because I have some other Walmart stories. And these are from a now defunct company. I think some people will be able to will know the history. But without naming names, this was a autonomous robot that was like really tall, like 6 feet tall. And we've heard, and it was deployed, in hundreds of stores. So there's, we've heard any number of stories from the team, from people driving those scooters, like in-store scooters, and repeatedly banging on purpose against the robot. So robot violence. But there's a couple of stories, and I may have told these before, but I think they stand the test of time. So one was one time, this is, there's a picture, a square heavy base with something skinny sticking up, which was mostly holding cameras, right, and a couple of sensors. So one day, one of the robots isn't moving. And after further investigation, they find that it's horizontal. It doesn't want to be horizontal, it wants to be vertical. And with some fancy tools that they had access to from some company, they're able to go back in time, and basically what they pieced together is that after hours, somebody was doing cleaning, maybe not with an autonomous robot, and they strung an extension cord over the shelves from one shelf to the other. So as you are moving forward, you get clotheslined, like literally by this. I'm pretty sure the developers of the hardware didn't anticipate that kind of air attack on the robot. So I think we need to remember, since these are scary stories, that robots are in hostile environments, right? They're sometimes just the environment itself, not through intentional, attacks, but you need to have that kind of like in cybersecurity, you need to think about like the attack envelope and all those things. Maybe we need to do a little bit more of that anticipation of like, how will this be attacked by the environment or people, or, it's easy to think about like humidity, but, less easy to think about extension cords at, 5.5 feet of height. So anyway, so lots of other stories. Would love to hear from other people, things that they've heard or they've encountered as they were scaling.
I actually want to ask Andrew, knowing he worked at a battery company for a while, if he has anything from that side of the fence.
No, I don't remember anything from that. Although I know that some of our batteries, we were talking to AMR companies, like autonomous forklift companies, because a lot of the batteries we were building were for forklifts. So there was some possibility of that, but we didn't have that partnership set up when I was there. Or if they did, I wasn't involved in it. But I remember hearing a story once, and I feel like this might have been related to Brain Corp. I'm not sure, but I guess it doesn't matter which company it was. It was
I won't confirm nor deny.
Yeah, some sort of robot that was meant to operate in stores autonomously, maybe even when there were not people around, but that some of the sensors in the robot were looking for infrared light, and I think they were like collision detection using something related to infrared. And then the store actually had some infrared like heating lamps that were positioned like in the ceiling, pointed down over the floor, and that sometimes the robots would get stuck in certain spots where the infrared light was really intense in that area, and it was acting as if it was about to collide with something, but there was nothing there. And like, so when people were watching the video camera, the security footage, they're like, well, why is it stopping? There's nothing there. And then later, after some digging, they found out, oh, well, directly above it, there's this thing emitting infrared light, and that the sensor, even though there's no object there.
Yeah,
Like,
sensor noise is always one of those corner cases I don't think you'll ever necessarily get away from. For example, the sun is a massive emitter of like broad spectrum energy in just about any spectrum you could imagine. And hypothetically, of course, if you've got a 3D time of flight camera, so Andrew, similar with the IR emitter, and then it reads back, those 3D time of flight cameras often operate in IR. Heaters will do that, but the sun will also sometimes do that. And there was a particular customer that had a big atrium, and at the end of the atrium was a giant glass wall, and they would always clean their floors before the start of business. Now, that's typically around dawn time. And it's like Stonehenge. Twice a year, they would complain that their robot would stop running, and he would review it, and it would just be looking directly into the sun as the sun was rising. And so the advice, you're not going to, there's no return on investment to actually fix that particular issue, because you'll spend so much time and effort going after it that you could just say, run it 10 minutes earlier or run it 10 minutes later. So twice a year, we have to give them the advice, hey, run this at a different time of the day. But there's a user experience thing here too. And Andrew, yours is, I think, more of a, call it early teething pain from a company that is just starting to launch. But the other side of that is you've got users who don't have expertise on perception or expertise on how these sensors actually work, and they just have a tool and they want to use a tool. The other Halloween topic could have been anthropomorphization of robots, which I have strong opinions on, but I'll table that for another time. People want to get their job done, and if there's something that is hindering them from getting their job done, they're going to get upset and they're going to complain. And perception and anything around the sensor stack, whether they're cleaning the sensors, whether the sensor is damaged because they used a solvent on it that now damaged the lens, whether it's, there are so many problems with the perception system, and even relatively easy environments, that training people to use robots and understand how they're breaking is always going to be really hard, really difficult, and people just want a tool that works.
Yeah, I think we've definitely noticed that as we move from the industrial space, where obviously most customers are extremely used to things like maintenance schedules and keeping things running, and the equipment itself is also very mature and is pretty stable anyway. And so moving into an environment where, yeah, like you said, people just want a tool, and they have maybe elevated expectations about what robots can do and how much common sense they have, which is unfortunately still zero.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge.
But I guess it's about finding a balance between, providing the convenient tools that don't require any training or thought, and educating the users as to what's realistic and what's possible.
Yeah.
So I mean, our first user in Japan very much explicitly wants a kind of no-touch tool that they don't have to do anything with, which, I mean, at least makes it clear what they want. But yeah, challenges with the edge cases, extension cords, and things like that is.
Yeah, Gene, welcome. Before we dive into another horror story, scary story, why don't you introduce yourself for the rest of the group?
I think you're on mute, Gene.
Thanks. Sorry I'm late, everybody. I was on another call with a large AMR provider. And so they didn't have any horror stories, sadly. But I'm currently editorial director at Robotics 24/7. And I've been covering robotics at various publications for about the past 8 or 9 years. And I've been a member of ROG since pretty much the beginning, I think. And I'm sorry I'm missing all your events in California, but that is going to change. I promise. So, and I'll have more to say about that later this week. So, but please continue the horror stories.
You're really gonna let that dangling there, Gene. That's terrible of you.
That's the suspense. I gotta do something.
So the theme for today, Gene, is kind of like horror stories, scary situations, and not so much that the robots are scary, but that the conditions under which the robots are being deployed are less than ideal. I think you mentioned that you were talking to a large AMR vendor and they didn't have any horror stories that they were willing to tell you, right? Because everyone,
in fact, I've talked to some of their users, right?
Stories. Yes.
Well, I'm talking to users who have stories that, these robots are not as reliable as promised, or that the adoption integration curve is much steeper than we were told it would be. And so what you think would be a rollout that might take a couple of weeks or months ends up taking a lot longer, because, and again, everyone talks, oh, you bring in the robot, it maps the place and we're done. If only that were the case. Because you still have to account for not only other assets or agents in the facility, but also the fact that people like rearranging shelving, and stuff falls off, and depending on how dirty the facility is, you might have to go out and clean things on a much more, and it's like there aren't little windshield wipers on your robot sensors, and so the worst thing to have happen, and you guys may already have mentioned this, so forgive me if I'm repeating, is you hear about deployment and you go back 6 months or a year later, and there's a row of robots sitting in the corner. And I've been in those facilities and seen that. And if you're the vendor, that's not a good place to be. If you're the user, it's an even worse place to be, because you're like, oh, those robots didn't do what we were promised. We're done. We're not going to get automation, and they're missing out on the opportunity. They just needed to understand better both their environment and their processes. And that lack of communication is why I'm hearing more and more of the successful robotic deployments involving a longer consultation ahead of time, and then an ongoing, you touch base between the vendor and the integrator and the user much more regularly than was previously discussed. So again, I don't know if you guys have already talked about it, but that's my 2 cents.
No, actually, Gene, one of the things I was gonna jump into is the row of robots sitting there a year later is a really interesting thing, because one of the topics that I had was listening to your customers, not pre-deployment, but post-deployment, listening to the end users and making the end user successful. I've worked with any variety of end users, some in janitorial. You're working with a different person every month. There's just turnover that is so incredibly fast that you can't possibly keep a person trained. So the user experience is critical to keeping the use of that robot up. But other larger organizations have people who have much more retention and they actually have much more ownership. But they also will notice changes. I mean, I've been personally attacked on the Walmart subreddit for pushing a software release that broke something. Not by name, but by role. But more importantly, I have the benefit of having been in an organization that had a large customer service team that had tickets coming in on a daily basis. When we were first standing this up, you talk about communication, and inside a company is just as critical as outside of a company. And we had one software release go out before, when this is where I'll talk about the benefit of phase releases, where you pick a subset and you don't push it to your entire fleet at once, and you catch those problems early. But there was a change to a control algorithm, and all of a sudden the reports that it skirted under the surface, and the reports suddenly said, your robot looks drunk, which is not a good thing for any customer to come in and say. But it turned out that space costs money, tests take time. You need to get the most impact for the testing that you can with like, and there's going to be trade-offs of stuff you test and don't test. And that's not proprietary. That's just the reality of being in product development. But what happened in this particular case was we did not have a long and straight enough aisle to really test out the changes to this algorithm. So, you know, we would have our smaller subsets of spaces, but we didn't have like a 200-foot long straight aisle or a 300-foot long straight aisle. And we got these videos from customers, the active customers, and you would literally see this thing like it was swerving the entire way down an aisle. And so we rolled the software back, and we had friendly customers in the area, so we sent our test team out overnight for about a week straight to test tweaks to this algorithm and eventually fix it. But you know, you don't ever, one, you want to catch your problems from your customers early, and two, you never want your customer to tell you that your robot looks drunk, because of all the words to describe a robot, that's probably the worst. But if you're not feeding back that to Gene, to wrap up where you were talking about, to get back, to keep those robots utilized, you have to keep that communication running after deployment, not just before and during deployment. Because I still am hesitant to believe that there's a robot fleet you can truly walk away from today. Maybe we're getting there. I think you can man behind the curtain some of it with, you know, robot operations platforms that can do remote interventions. But I think you still have to have a base level of support and a base level of understanding from the end users to make your robot successful. And I just launched in a work email last week. There is no autonomous deployment that can be just drop-in replacement for anything. You have to partner with customers. You have to make them understand that some bits of their operation do need to change to make autonomy successful. There's not a drop-in solution today. And you know, maybe large language models and the advances in AI will prove me wrong, but my current timeline for this is probably between 10 and 15 years. Maybe we'll accelerate it, but it's still not today.
So I have other stories. I think we've all heard some version of this, but I think for most mobile robots, their natural predator is forklifts. So whenever you're in a warehouse, for almost every robot versus forklift, anyone want to guess who wins? It's 100% of the time the forklift, right? Again, not naming names, but I have video of you know, a robot peacefully going down its path, and you know, this is a little geekier than usual, but you know how you can see the cost map and the point cloud and everything around the robot, right? So it's color coded usually. So it's going down, and then you see this squarish blob moving at speed at 90 degrees from the trajectory of travel. And then there's intersection of the direction of travel of the two vehicles. And then it was an autonomous forklift and an autonomous other thing that shall go unnamed. I think they're pretty good about avoiding obstacles moving at slow speeds, but two autonomous things moving at speed, state of the art isn't quite there today. I think, you know, the AV industry has done quite a bit of work on that, but you don't anticipate that in like maybe a warehouse environment. So I think that's interesting. And don't even get me started on manually operated forklifts, right? You know,
yeah, I was reading an article just this week about how dangerous forklifts are actually, just in general. So.
There are industrial accidents with forklifts on a weekly basis, if not more frequent than that.
Yeah, so sorry to interrupt. I'm going to have to drop off now, but it was great to meet you all. Learned a lot already, so hope to catch you again soon, guys.
Keep coming back, Daniel. There's
Yeah.
plenty more, I promise.
Thanks very much. Okay, thanks a lot. Cheers.
So I want to say maybe 5 minutes on the lighter side at the end. So we have about 13 minutes left. So why don't we do this? We have a tradition of announcements. I think today is a smaller crowd. So does anyone, I know Andrew in your intro and Phil in your intro, you mentioned about opportunities that you're seeking. Can you share a little bit more? And then that helps us kind of like propagate the news to other people.
You want to go first, Phil?
Sure. Yeah. So as I said in the beginning, I'm trying to take all of the fun developer foibles that we committed and help other companies not make them. More on the developer early stage than once the robots are in the field in mass. You know, while we're talking horror stories, we had one of our engineers, robotics engineer, but he was tasked with doing some basic cloud connections and of course committed the access key to the GitHub repository.
Happens in every company.
Right? It happens all the time because they don't teach you that in school, or they don't teach you how to fix it or mitigate it. And you know, yes, we can change the key because we at least were smart enough to set that up. But you know, trying to help avoid these things and bring some of that insight to companies. So I'm looking to meet up or connect to companies that need that sort of DevOps, robot DevOps assistance, and partner with them to build their platforms. Yeah, seeing a lot of developer mistakes. Made a few myself. You know, of course. Rewriting Git history, but then not getting everybody to download the new repository, and having to rewrite history a few more times. That was my fault. So yeah, looking for those sorts of opportunities with companies looking to build robots, but really interact with the software development teams to build up infrastructure and tooling to not make those mistakes. Things about test environments, you know, Joe, you mentioned not having a long enough hallway. Obviously, you don't know that till you realize you need that, but you know, maybe then you add another test to your automated test system, and then how do you manage to not spend forever with your automated tests? You know, knowing how to balance all that is a challenge, and if you have two engineers who are also responsible for other pieces, you know, it's hard. So that's what I'm looking for right now, is to help companies get through those pains.
Phil, where are you based?
I'm in Silicon Valley, San Mateo, California right now. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, you're in San Mateo?
Yeah.
That's where I was living.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I just moved out at the beginning of September.
Okay. Yeah. Been here for about 10 years. But yeah, when I was at Bosch, I was one of the few Bay Area natives, which was actually really fun. I love working with diverse people and learning about new cultures and new things and food from different places. So, yeah.
Very cool. Is Florian going to pop out and scare us with something?
I'm not sure what Florian's planning.
In his robot mask?
Oh, there we go.
Look.
Oh man.
I knew.
Florian, you got to make some noise so this is on video. You won't be on video if you don't start speaking.
Hello.
Who, me or Florian?
Florian.
Florian.
Orbito, mascot of In Orbit.
I love the Lego.
we try to keep this very oh, he's walking away again. I tried to get a screenshot before we walked away. We do try to keep this I want to say non-denominational, but Florian and I put our ROG hats on instead of our company hats, but I'll allow it this time around.
Yeah, I love how Bernardo's got the figure as well.
Yeah, this is In Orbito.
That's awesome.
Florian, you gonna walk up and down the street today wearing that?
Absolutely. So it is a homemade costume. So
I had no
I
idea.
think extra credits, I'm guessing, for that. But yeah.
How did you make the hands?
Those I bought. So these are from a Lego costume.
Okay.
This seems like a right time to thank In Orbit, our founding sponsor of Robot Operations Group, as we have promised to do for every meeting as a founding sponsor. But I don't actually have any general ROG housekeeping notes. As always, Florian mentioned earlier on, share this with your friends, colleagues, folks in your space. Phil, as you now will go out and hopefully make more contacts around the industry. There's going to be someone you work with who has no idea how they're going to scale their thing. That's what we're here for. Never want to be a standards org, never want to be prescriptive, but at the same time, as today kind of scratched the surface of, and if you've there's a couple of beers around and we're hitching onto a conference like we did a couple of weeks ago after Robo Business, there's some good stories and some good stuff to pick up. And our whole goal is not to be one company against another. Our whole goal is to grow the pie, because robotics is still small. The bigger the pie gets, the more we can all have of that pie. So we're here to support. We're here to make sure folks who are just hitting their 50th robot, and now they have to replace a sensor on every single robot, knows that they're not alone and they're not the only ones who have done this before. There's a light at the end of that tunnel.
And so last year we did an RoboxCon, the first in-person conference for road operations. Kind of the general plan is to do it every 2 years. Otherwise, it's too much of a organizational headache. And we had like really good attendance last time. People flying from around the country, from overseas, really good speakers and good topics. So I think there's an aspect of, as Joe was saying, you're not alone, you're part of a community. And I think that's, and we have a little bit of fun every now and then with costumes and other things. Gene, I mentioned at the beginning, a soft goal for ROG is we're at 274 members. How long will it take to get to the next 00 milestone? Maybe by the end of the year. So I know you have a very large following. I know you're a loyal member of ROG. So if there are opportunities, maybe before the end of the year, maybe, I don't know, we can collect some horror stories and write them up. Or maybe not horror stories, and mix horror stories with success stories. So open to ideas, but I think that could be Bernardo.
Yeah, let me add my little 2 cents to that. On Thursday, November 16, a couple more 2 weeks, and at the David L. Lauren Convention Center in Pittsburgh, there will be the Discovery Day 2023. Are you going to be there, Florian?
I might. I need to disentangle my travel, but yeah, I'm trying to make it there.
Okay, I'm going to be there. If anyone else, everyone's welcome. It's a 1-day event, and that'd be a great opportunity to promote ROG and recruit a few more members to reach that goal by the end of the year. So I will be promoting ROG during the event.
Thank you, Bernardo. We appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Joe and Florian, one of the things that has impressed me, because I've been attending most of these meetings, is that you really do delve into a lot of different topics over the course of the year. And so I think there might be an opportunity for like maybe a year-end piece from your guys' perspective or from the organization's perspective, and think about, what's the conversation? What are some of the points that emerged from, looking across our different meetings? Because I think there is real value. And for people, even if you just drop in, people will learn something. But the idea of like getting to know the other members and getting to hear, whether it's horror stories or success stories or just general questions. There's not too many opportunities, even at trade shows, to have such direct access. And I take notes, but understandably most of it's off the record. The ability to have those candid conversations about what went wrong, I think is really valuable. And so there's a way of addressing that. I'm happy to help.
Also sounds like an impetus if Florian shares the recordings with me. We can get the recordings up to the website at the same time, so they're up to date. And so when this goes out, Eugene, we can actually reference the up-to-date recordings of, we've talked about these things, now go and watch the hour-long video if you have the time or have the interest.
Right. Or, here, talk about this topic and here it is. Yeah, I think that's a way of looking at it. And then, pulling out a few anecdotes from them would be great. But because unfortunately, Halloween is we're already halfway through the day.
No, I think we don't want to have a message that for the general community that's only about scary stories. I think we want that mix of kind of like success, moderated by the complexity of scaling.
Well, and Phil mentioned that, he made mistakes. That's how you learn, right? If you do everything perfect every time, you might cruise along, but then when something inevitably does go sideways, you're really in trouble. But if you make mistakes along the way, we talked about a lot about resilience and reliability. Humans are part of that. And our ability to react and learn from experience is an important element to these successful deployments.
This is turning almost into the kind of conversation I have with my children about.
I'm not sure how to take that.
No, about resilience and learning from mistakes and growth mindset. I think is something that applies to us in the robotics field.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think with that, Joe, do you want to do the honors of wrapping us up for Halloween edition of the Robot Operations Group?
I think you already did with that costume, but I will thank everybody for coming out. Again, light crowd today, but really good discussion. I love these, the ones where, it's always nice to be able to talk. We have to be a little bit guarded because it is recorded and there are some things that we can't necessarily open up about. But great discussion today, Phil. Good to have you here. Hope you keep coming back. Hope you found this valuable. Everyone else, always great to see you again. Just looking at the calendar, my expectation is we won't meet again until 2024 because bi-weekly will put us right at New Year's. And generally with the holidays, that's a little untenable. So keep an eye out on the meetup group and the LinkedIn page for our next meeting. We'll try to announce it here in the next 2 weeks so everyone can get that date on your calendar sooner than later. So thanks for coming out. Great discussion. And as always, I have no tagline, so I guess there's no as always. But thanks, everybody.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Yeah. Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
Nice to see you guys.